Everybody, Seattle sports fans, Converge Media followers, and just anybody who's tuning in. This is Charles Hamaker, your host of Circling Seattle Sports. And we've got another fine week of Seattle sports for you. Not as always some of the results that we wanted, but it's all right. It's always fun to go over everything and see what's going on in our Seattle sports world. So with that being said, we're going to jump into the first team, as always, as we do on this show, with the Seattle Seahawks going into their Week 4 matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. That was a tough divisional game against the Niners. They would come out on top 28-21 in a big game that they needed to win after dropping 2 straight to both Tennessee and Minnesota. Huge game for Seattle. It wasn't a pretty win. It was an ugly, tough game that they had to scratch and fight for. They got off to a rough start, having punted 5 times in the first half, only putting up 234 yards of offense, but still a game that you come out victorious. It doesn't matter how you win in these divisional games. It's more so about just getting that victory and looking ahead at the division, what sort of seeding implications those games might have when it rolls out to the final few weeks of the season. The offense still has a lot to figure out. 2 touchdowns in the third quarter certainly helped them, scoring once, and then in the following kickoff, getting a fumble recovery to score another touchdown. But as I mentioned, the 234 yards of offense is concerning, considering the hype around having a new offensive coordinator, as well as, having Russell Wilson at all should mean that your offense should succeed, but also the weapons. So offense still has a lot to figure out. It is still week 4. The defense was really emulated the phrase bend but don't break. They gave up 457 yards of offense, but held the Niners to 3 touchdowns, that final touchdown coming in garbage time at the end of the game. Another key point was that Alex Collins has really solidified himself as the running back too. We'll speak a little bit more on Mr. Collins in the stat leader section. But with that being said, ever since preseason and with Rashad Penny having to deal with injuries throughout the preseason and during his entire tenure in Seattle, it's been difficult to really put Penny in a lineup and know that he's going to be a consistent force, week to week, let alone year to year. Collins has come back, a guy that was drafted by Seattle, spent time in Baltimore, and then came back. Collins has been a guy that came through in the preseason and effectively balled out and has now, at least in my opinion, really solidified himself as the second running back on this depth chart. And he led rushing this week for the Seahawks. So besides that, Russell Wilson became the fastest quarterback to 100 wins in his career. He did so in 10 seasons. And 10 seasons and 4 games into that 10 seasons. It's insane to think that Russell's been around for that long. But congratulations to Russell on 100 wins, but also, as I mentioned, I'm going to harp on it. The offense still has a lot to figure out when you've got a Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Chris Carson. Gerald Everett did not play this game, and we'll get into that in the injury report. Will Dissly, just among some of the offensive weapons that this team has. But good to really turn things around, hopefully, against the Niners. It's always good to win against the Niners, especially down in their own home stadium. So we will jump over to stat leaders here. Russell Wilson led the pack 16 of 23, 16 completions on 23 attempts, 149 yards passing. That's a little bit lower for Russell than we'd like to see, or than is normal for him. 2 touchdowns passing on the day. Rushing, Alex Collins, as I mentioned, 10 carries, 44 yards and a touchdown. Kind of unique to see Chris Carson not leading the team in rushing, as he's been a staple for this team in the running game for a few years here. Receiving, DK Metcalf, 4 receptions, 65 yards and a touchdown. So you can see the air game nor the running game none of them really showed out more than the other. It was kind of it was a divisional football game. That's how I'll put it. It was a divisional football game that, 2 good teams that have had a good rivalry throughout the years, historically, played a good game. Tackles, Bobby Wagner led 10 tackles, 5 solo, 1 pass deflection. And then turnover department, we have some defensive turnovers here and a special team turnover. Linebacker John Radigan, in his rookie season out of Army, had a fumble recovery on that kickoff that I mentioned earlier from the third quarter. And then safety Quandre Diggs had an interception in this game of quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo, the first interception that this team has recorded this year. So overall, as I mentioned, offense still has some work to do. The Niners usually have a good defense. I know that there were some years in the past here before their Super Bowl run that they were really just kind of in a rebuilding state, as well as last year dealing with injuries. But the Niners usually have a good defensive unit. So to put up the meager offense that we did, it's understandable. I mean, if you're playing a bottom of the barrel team, then I'd be a little bit frustrated. But this is a 49ers team in a tough NFC West that will compete with you, that will fight with you, and will not give you anything, for free. So again, good statement win to get a sort of bounce back against the Niners of all people after coming up from those two losses to both Tennessee and Minnesota. So going into injury news, as I mentioned, tight end Gerald Everett on September 29th was placed on the reserve/COVID-19 list. He is the first COVID positive test that this team has had since the pandemic started. So normally the Seahawks top of the league in dealing with the pandemic, working, to stay safe and follow protocols and get tested. Everett here becomes the first COVID positive list, and that's fine. It'll, just work through it, go throughout the season. But certainly would be nice to have him out there, and hopefully, nothing serious happens with Gerald there. For game day inactives, wide receiver D. Eskridge was not able to go with this game. Still dealing with that concussion of his. Hopefully that's not something that impacts him long term. It was looking like ramping up to this game that he would be able to go, but obviously, as I mentioned, game day inactive, was not able to go, and he was a scratch for that game. Linebacker Benson Mayowa has been dealing with a nagging injury the past few weeks, and he was not able to go. Cornerback John Reed, tackle Brandon Shell, tackle Jamarco Jones, and defensive end LJ Collier were all the remaining game day inactives. So Brandon Shell is your starting right tackle. He's dealing with injury. And then tackle Jamarco Jones was set to start at right tackle as his backup, but felt ill both on Saturday and Sunday morning, leading to Cedric Ogbuehi to start against the 49ers. So you're down to your third string right tackle, not exactly ideal. On October 2nd, running back Rashad Penny was placed on IR, as I've been talking about. Rashad Penny just has a case of the injury bug, has not been able to get rid of that, and it's tough sledding right now for Rashad. On October 3rd, during the game, linebacker Cody Barton left the game with a rib injury. As I mentioned, Jamarco Jones was not able to go for this game. And then defensive end Carlos Dunlap jammed his toe. So his status for Thursday night against the Rams is up in the air at this current point. Team-related notes. On September 28th, the team signed defensive tackle Robert Nkemdiche to the active roster from the practice squad and waived quarterback Jake Luton, Marysville native. On September 29th, the team signed wide receiver Philip Dorsett, first-round pick out of Miami, a former first-round pick, my apologies. Tight end Ryan Izzo and quarterback Jake Luton to the practice squad. So a little bit of shuffling. Usually when you see certain guys get waived, as I mentioned with Luton, they end up coming back to the practice squad. It's just, some guys they want on the active roster, some that need to be on the practice roster. October 2nd, tight end Kobe Parkinson and tackle Cedric Ogbuehi were activated from the IR. So good to see Kobe Parkinson back. Dealt with that foot injury on his other foot in the preseason. Last season he injured his previous foot, as I mentioned, and Ogbuehi had to start, from IR, had to start in the right tackle spot with Jamarco Jones out. The team sits now at a 2-2 record. They're back at 500, which is good to see. They're third in the NFC West now, behind the Rams and the Cardinals, but they are ahead of the 49ers. And this is an important game, Week 5, October 7th versus the Rams at home on a 5:20 p.m. Pacific time start on Thursday Night Football. So Thursday night, usually those are divisional games. It's kind of an odd setting. It's a quick turnaround week from Sunday to Thursday, and especially to have both the Niners and the Rams in that short time period. So this is a crucial game. The Rams, we're looking like the clear-cut division leader, having Matthew Stafford, having that defense with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. And then the Cardinals come into their building this past week and blow them out by 17 points. We're in a tough division, folks. It's going to be a wild ride this year. And the Seahawks are going to need to figure that offense out quickly because there are some damn good defenses in this division as well as offenses. So Seattle will need to realize that there's no time to rest this upcoming week and get into things quickly. Looking into our Seattle Mariners here, Over the past week, they played a 3-game series against the Oakland Athletics. That series would start with a 13-4 win. September 28th, they would win that game 4-2. My apologies, going back to the 27th. So players of the game for the 27th would include both first baseman Ty France with 4 hits, 3 runs, 4 RBIs, and a walk, as well as right fielder Mitch Haniger with 2 hits, 2 runs, and 6 RBIs. September 28th, player of the game in that 4-2 win over the Athletics would be designated hitter Luis Torrens with 3 hits and 1 run. September 29th, in the final game of that Athletics series, they would win 4-2, eliminating the Athletics from playoff contention. Player of the game would be center fielder Jared Kelenic with 1 hit and 2 RBIs. In the first game of a very important 3-game stretch against the Angels, the team would lose to the Angels on October 1st, 2-1 in front of a packed house. Player of the game would be center fielder Jared Kelenic with 1 hit and 1 RBI. October 2nd versus the Angels, the team would win that game 6-4 in a thriller. Player of the game would be right fielder Mitch Haniger with 4 hits, 5 RBIs, and 1 run. Then October 3rd, game 162 of the season, the final game of the regular season, the team would lose the Angels 7-3. Tough loss. I'll get into it in a second. But player of the game would be center fielder Jared Kelenic with 2 hits, 1 run, and 1 RBI. So next week, going to do a season recap for the Mariners. It's a tough loss to lose in game 162, but me just saying losing, the season ending in game 162 is crucial, considering that this was a ball club that was only projected to win 70 games in general this season. They win 90 games, so 20 above projection. You've got young talent all across the board that performed. J.P. Crawford made a big step. He played most of the year without center fielder Kyle Lewis, who was the 2020 AL Rookie of the Year. James Paxton did not play hardly at all this year. He threw like 12 pitches in his first start and was injured from there. Jared Kelenic has improved ever since his call-up, had a great September. And as you saw, in player of the game for those past few weeks, he was player of the game for several of those games. You've got, Logan Gilbert debuting this year, rookie year, had some little struggles, but overall is a guy that can continue to work on things. That's the thing, too, with me is, you've got these rookie guys. You've got Kelenic, Gilbert, and Raleigh. They may have struggled, right? But even, you look at baseball, Mike Trout struggled as a rookie. A lot of people struggle early on, and then they get their footing, and it's fine. So now these guys have got a whole off season. They've got a whole spring training eventually when we get to that in March to get better and to work on their craft and to hone in their craft. This is a ball club that overperformed, that really blew away the odds and made people believe. That belief slogan, something that continued throughout the weekend. If you're able to attend, I want to thank you for that. They had 44,000 people at least for those last 3 games against the Angels. It was a beautiful sight. It was a beautiful sight to have that many people in the ballpark, to see all those believe signs and just to hear how loud it was. And to hear, the stories of people hadn't been to games in this long. People came from all over the country, from Hawaii, from Arizona, just to see these guys, for a potential race. And I know it's frustrating. The playoff drought extends to 20 years with this loss, but it's an exciting time. It's not a matter of, maybe next year. It's a matter of, we can't wait until next year just because of the, performance of the young talent on this team. You look around, acquiring Abraham Toro, Ty France really showing out as a true first baseman and not just a bat. Cal Raleigh, as I mentioned, somebody who's a switch hitter. He's young. Jared Kelenic improving. You've got the farm system, the number 1 farm system in baseball. It's nothing from here. You've got a major league club that outperformed itself and, grew over time, got the crowd into it, got the city behind them. You've got the number 1 ball club, and you've got a team that's got $130 million in potential payroll this offseason. So you've got money to spend on free agents. John Stanton, I implore you, hopefully going 20 wins over projection is a reason to do that. But it's an exciting time to be a Mariners fan. It was great. It was a great season. The run differential thing is ridiculous because the team had, I could point out 5 losses where they lost, lopsided. 5 losses out of 162 is nothing, right? But those 5 losses were what accounted for that negative 48 run differential or whatever. This is a ball club that, got people behind them, had a lot of damn fun this year, and we're on the pinnacle. We're on the edge here. We're on the edge of something great with this team, and I know that our season's over right now, but I'm really excited for next year and what's to come for these Mariners. So I'll shut my mouth. We'll do season recap next week and look into a little bit more of the numbers and the players themselves. But speaking of players and numbers, we're going to get into Player of the Week for the Mariners here. It had to be Mitch Haniger. If you witnessed any of those games last week, Mitch Haniger had an incredible past week. It was like he was trying to do it all by himself. In 6 games played and 25 at-bats, Mitch had 8 hits, 5 runs, 4 homers, 12 half of his hits were homers over the past week. My goodness. 12 RBIs, 20 total bases, 2 walks, a 320 batting average, a .370 on base percentage, an 800 flat slugging percentage, and a 1.17 on base plus slugging. So Mitch having an incredible week, really showing out. I have to admit, I was a little bit bullish on whether or not this team brings back Mitch Haniger throughout the season. I know, at the beginning of the year, I was a little bit concerned maybe. He hit a stretch over the second half where it looked a little bit rough, wasn't able to really make contact with the ball, not barreling it up. But, his impact throughout the season, his consistency, after coming off of those injuries, and, that past week really has said, this is a guy that I would want to have on my ball club next year. So salute to Mitch on that. Great week, great last week. He's my player of the week for that last week of the season for the Mariners. They end with a 90-72 record, the first time that they've won 90 games since the year 2003. They end the year second in the AL West behind Houston, and they were in that division race just about until this past week. In team-related news, on September 28th, right-handed pitcher Matt Brash was called up to the Major League Club, as well as MLB minor league awards were announced for the Mariners. Right-handed pitcher Isaiah Campbell from High A ball, outfielder Jack Larson from Double A, outfielder Cade Marlowe from High A, outfielder Julio Rodriguez from Double A, right-handed pitcher David Ellingson from Double A, and right-handed pitcher Matt Brash from Double A were all honored in different roles by the Mariners themselves. They were honored on that Saturday game against the Angels pregame. September 30th, right-handed pitcher Matt Andres cleared waivers and elected free agency, so best of luck to Mr. Andres in free agency endeavors. October 2nd, infielder Donovan Walton was recalled from AAA Tacoma. Right-handed pitcher Wyatt Mills was optioned to AAA Tacoma. Right-handed pitcher Andres Munoz was reinstated from the 60-day injury list. And then on that day, September 2nd, obviously, October 3rd, let me skip here. Seattle seasons end on the last game of the season. Playoff drought extends to 20 years, but hope, as I mentioned, we're just on the tippy top, the little slippy slope of getting to the playoffs here. That Sunday, they needed to win that game, as well as have Boston or New York lose for their season to continue to play a potential play-in game, but none of those things happened. Boston won their game. New York won their game on a walk-off against the Rays, and the Mariners lost. So in the 8th inning of our game, the scoreboard totals went final. Boston won, New York won, so we knew that our game didn't mean anything effectively because we needed our win plus one of those losses. So in the 8th inning, Scott Service took out Kyle Seager to have him have a little send-off moment. They gave Kyle third base, and there was a loud applause for Kyle, several curtain calls. Several people stayed 40 minutes after the game had ended and the gates had closed just to cheer on Kyle and thank him. Is likely playing his last game in a Mariner uniform. I say that due to the comments made in the offseason by former president of baseball operations, Kevin Mather, plus the contract option that Seager has going into next year, $20 million for a third baseman who's, getting a little bit older. $20 million is a lot to pay a position player regardless. So to do so, it's overall, there are some signs that are pointing to this most likely not happening. So with that being said, and I'll be mentioned a little bit as well in the season recap, all I can do is tip my cap to Kyle Seager Class act not only for this ball club, but also this city, a guy that was involved in the community, loved this city and stayed to the city throughout his entire career. Certainly didn't need to do so, but proud to call him a Seattle Mariner and easily the greatest third baseman in Mariners history. If you want to debate me on that, you can, but you're going to lose. With that being said, there's no looking ahead for the Mariners in terms of games for the next week. We will have a end of season, regular season recap coming up for you next week, though. So stay tuned for that. Certainly going to look at some surprises from this past year for our Mariners ball club. So shifting over to our Seattle Sounders football club here. Over the past week, they took on the San Jose Earthquakes on the road. They would win that game 3-1. Player of the game would be forward Raul Ruidiaz, 2 goals on 2 shots, 2 on target, as well as an 80% pass percentage. So Raul continues to mount on his incredible season and really showing out for those who know that Raul has been called into the World Cup qualifiers for Peru. So congratulations to Raul on that. We will lose him for a little bit of the season here, but he won't be gone for too long. October 3rd versus the Rapids, they came back to play that game at home here in Lumen Field. They would win that game 3-0. Player of the game would be João Paulo, 1 goal on 2 shots, 2 on target, and 1 assist, an 80% pass percentage there. So a big win against Colorado. Colorado was 3rd in the Western Conference prior to this match. Christian Roldan extended his goal-scoring streak to 4 games. The Sounders started off hot early with a second-minute goal, that one being by Roldan. All 3 of their goals scored in the first half. So Sounders really got things going on early and just didn't look back. No score in the second half. So those 3 goals in the first half were the driving force. This was the second week this year that the Sounders have scored 9 points in 1 week. That's saying something because these long weeks, playing 3 matches in 1 week, that's not an easy feat to accomplish. And for the Sounders to do so twice in 1 year, that's saying something. We're not even at the end of the year yet. So the Sounders continue to stay hot. They stay on top of the Western Conference. They're second in the MLS with points with 54. They sit now at a 16-win, 6-draw, 5-loss record, and they look ahead to their next game against the Whitecaps on October 9th. That is here at home at a 6 p.m. Pacific time start. So big on the Sounders there. They continue to roll. Their season continues on. As Brian Schmetzer said, similar to what the Mariners were doing, he had a quote talking about the standings. He said, "We don't want to scoreboard watch. We don't want to worry about anybody else's what they're doing. We're the Seattle Sounders. We want to worry about what we're doing, and we want to win out so that we have our own conference. We have the home field advantage locked up, and that's not something that we have to worry about." So the Sounders continue to chug on. Big matchup against Vancouver, a Cascadia matchup there, Cascadia rivalry game. Always fun to watch. Looking into our Seattle Storm. Lastly, for this week here, nothing really too jumping out. No games, obviously. Storm season ended. But some exit interviews after the final game. Brianna Stewart spoke on becoming a free agent next season. She said, "Seattle has always been my home. I plan on being back unless something crazy happens. We have unfinished business." So Stewie making it clear that, despite being a free agent next season, she's not looking to go anywhere else. Guard Jewel Lloyd spoke as well. She said, "I'm going to take a break, talk with my family, talk with Stewie, reevaluate my life and my career." Speaking on her upcoming free agency as well as her offseason. So Stewie, and Jewel have a tight relationship there. Certainly hoping to keep both of those players locked up for a long time. Would love to see them just play out their entire career in a Storm uniform. But Jewel has an important decision to look up to this upcoming season. So need to let her really just take some time to herself and decide that on her own. Young big Ezi Magbagor spoke as well, identifying increasing her shooting range, on-ball defense, low-post defense, and finishing at the rim as areas to improve this season. Ezi, playing in her first 3 years of her career, some stuff to improve, but still some bright spots for her over this past year. So big ups to the Aussie product there. Point guard Jordan Canada spoke on her upcoming free agency. She said, "I love this organization. I would love to be here. I want to stay here if possible. If there's other opportunities out there, I'll explore them." Canada, an important key piece of this organization, somebody that, runs the floor when Sue Bird is not there And even that, I know we mentioned last week, talking about Sue Bird wearing her options. If Sue Bird's not back, Jordan Canada is more than likely the person that's going to be taking reins at the point guard position. So big offseason coming here for the Storm. I mean, looking at that, looking who's speaking, and looking at free agency, these are some big things to note. And then Coach Noelle Quinn spoke as well. She said that she wants Jewell Loyd on her team, but also acknowledges that Loyd needs her space and time to figure out what is best for herself. She spoke about how Climate Pledge Arena can be used as a recruiting tactic to attract free agents to Seattle moving forward. The arena will be one of, if not the best in the WNBA compared to others around the league that are used. She will join some NBA teams or visit with them this upcoming offseason to continue to learn more about the game as well as grow and build as a coach. So what a year for the Storm here. Obviously not having Stewie for the last game of the season, in that one game playoff is tough, but we have an incredible organization here that does things the right way, that has built a winning culture, and has some important players. Obviously, you hear Jewell Loyd, Brianna Stewart, Jordan Canada all talking about how they want to be here. That's important. You may see different teams around the league, players want to get out of certain situations. I don't hear that too often about players in Seattle. So that's good, and it's a very key offseason, as you can tell. There's some things to note for the Storm here, some key decisions to be made, not only by the front office, but also by the players. Jewell Loyd got to sit and figure things out. Sue Bird sitting and figuring things out herself. So big past year for the Sounders. Big past week for the Storm. And as I mentioned, season recap for them coming up next week. So you've got Mariners season recap coming up next week, Storm season recap coming up next week. For the other two teams that we cover here on the show, Seahawks facing the Rams on Thursday night. They will have a quick turnaround against a team that's pretty damn tough and is a team that's been picked to win the Super Bowl by many in the media. Not me, though. And the Sounders facing the Whitecaps in an important game. Every game is pretty key going forward, just because you're trying to keep pace with Sporting Kansas City in the Western Conference. You're 2 points ahead of KC. Those 2 points is a razor-thin margin, because if you lose a game and KC wins one, they shoot right above you. Maybe won by 1 point, but it's still, you would like to extend that lead if entirely possible. So with that being said, I don't want to make any promises now, but I am going to look into potentially adding some teams to this. Obviously, if you know your Seattle sports, you know that the Seattle Kraken continue to play their preseason matches. Their season opener game is going to be on the 12th of October here, so that's coming up, as well as our women's soccer team. If you follow soccer at all, it's very important that you know that there is a professional women's soccer league here in the U.S. It's the NWSL. There's a lot of news around it right now, but don't let it discourage you from the fact that there's some extremely talented women playing in that league, and they could use your support as well. So some key things happening in Seattle sports, and I'm just incredibly happy to be able to sit here in front of you and be able to talk about it. So I want to thank you for tuning in. This has been the October 4th edition of the Circling Seattle Sports Circling Seattle Sports Show. You can check out the podcast as well as if you like. I want to thank Salman behind the camera here, always a big help, as well as Big O wherever he is. We will see you next week. Sadly, without no Mariners or Storm, that's going to feel weird, but looking into adding some stuff potentially. So I want to thank you all, and I will see you back next week. You all stay safe and take care out there.